Hello and welcome to From the Make Stand here on Artist Echoes. We've seen an excellent set from Mark Rawlins, or Mark the Poet as he's also known. Now we're just going to have a bit of a chat about his poetry and how he writes it and loads of things like that. So Mark, how are you? Really enjoyed your set.
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for asking me back. It's
Yeah,
really good to be here again.
great. So for people who don't really know you as well as some of us, just want to tell us a bit about yourself, some things you've done and...
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mark the poet. I've been writing poetry now for probably about 10 years.
Mm,
Um, Before that, I kind of I'd written loads of stuff,
right,
sort of
sure.
short stories
Oh, right.
and sort of bits of screenplays and all kinds of other
Yeah,
stuff. I was a
mm,
bit of a closet writer, to
right,
be honest. Um, and then I did a degree course in creative writing
right,
at
sure.
MMU,
Mm,
Cheshire. And it was brilliant because it sort of got me writing, and not only was I writing, but I was writing, and sharing it with other people,
yeah,
which is what
sure.
I've not done before. And so it kind of all escalated from that. And I had always been a bit wary of poetry. And
Mm,
to be honest, I think I'd sort of had, as I think lots of people have, had a bad experience of poetry from school
yeah,
days.
yeah. A bit
Um,
dry, I suppose.
yeah, and I kind of I guess I was a bit scared of it.
Mm,
There were no, having said that, there were poems that I liked and
yeah,
poets that I
sure.
liked, but as a thing, and it was certainly something I never thought I wanted to do or was
Mm,
particularly interested in doing. Um, but I kind of, as part of the course that I was doing, I had to write some poetry, and I was encouraged to do some kind of spoken word poetry,
yeah,
some actual performance poetry. And in a previous life, I was a bit of a performer. I've been an actor and I've done
right,
sort of
right.
stand-up
Okay.
comedy and
Mm,
things like that. So I'm kind of a bit of a notorious show-off, really,
right.
by
Yeah.
nature, and so that kind of melded together, really.
Mm,
And so I've been writing poetry, really, as I say, for about 10 years. And what I write is written to be read aloud
yeah.
or recited
Mm,
aloud or performed,
sure.
really. So it doesn't. I don't think it works so well on the page, but
Mm,
it's supposed it's the poetry I write. I don't think this is the case for all poems or all poetry, but the poetry I write is works better
mm.
when you hear it actually sort of performed.
So when you were writing poetry initially and now, were there particular, was it poets that influenced you, or was it more musicians that influenced your style, or what would you say?
Um, well, I was always an angry young man, and now I'm an angry old
Right,
man.
sure.
So when I was young, I was into punk rock, and
Yeah.
I was into bands like the Clash and
Mm,
the Jam and the Sex Pistols, and and stuff like that. And kind of and I'm still sort of a bit of an aging punk rocker,
right.
really,
Yeah.
now. And so I suppose that was the music that was
Mm,
really important
yeah.
to me when I was young. And so when it came to poetry, the first poet I would have ever said I liked, if you'd have said who's your favorite poet, it would have been John Cooper
Yeah.
Clarke,
Yeah.
because he was sort of around
Mm,
at the time when of the punk scene.
yeah.
But he was doing something a little bit different. He was
Mm,
doing poetry in a sort of environment that was probably very hostile to
yeah.
that.
Mm,
And um and he was brilliant, and still is brilliant, I
mm,
think, and a very big influence. And so that thing where a lot of my poetry has sort of quite a distinctive rhythm
yeah.
to it,
Mm,
and has got a bit of a sort of ranty edge
mm,
about it. That comes from John Cooper
sure.
Clarke, really. I think but the other thing that happened is when I was doing that course that I was talking about at MMU, um, somebody showed us a video of Fiona Shaw
Right.
performing "The Wasteland" by T.S.
Mm,
Eliot. Um, and if you've never seen that, see it, watch it. It is just absolutely brilliant. Now, I had read The Wasteland, and I think I tried to study it at A level, and it had gone completely over my head. Seeing it actually performed by somebody who I think is an absolutely fantastic actress and performer, but seeing it performed was just an absolute revelation. And it was and it was the idea that the sort of words and the sort of rhythm of the words and the patterns of the words and everything, it sort of evoked all kinds of stuff, and it was absolutely brilliant. And that's, I think, the moment where I thought I would like to do that. Not that I've ever done anything anywhere near as good as Fiona Shaw doing The Wasteland, but I suppose that's what I've kind of that's what's kind of fired me to do it, really.
I think that's true for quite a lot of poets, that the first time you see poetry done live, it's so different to what's on the page, like completely changes it, doesn't it? I mean, even to like just hearing someone, but seeing someone doing it live completely changed it, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it does, and then following on from that, I started going to poetry slams, which was the kind of uh, which was the kind of opening, if you like, really, for going along and doing. I mean, I think nowadays there's sort of more spoken word poetry around, and there's more of a kind of scene. But back then, all there really was poetry slams, and I remember going along to some in Manchester, and I was absolutely terrified. I mean, it was it's quite a terrifying experience.
Do you enjoy the competition of them, or is it?
I never liked the competitiveness of them, really, unless I won.
Right.
And that didn't happen very often. But I mean, I suppose everybody likes to be told that they're good and to take praise and stuff. But generally, my real answer to your question is that I think that anything sort of creative or artistic, shouldn't really be judged. It's kind of, because it's subjective, and a poem or a performance that you might love, I might not, and vice versa. And it's it's just it's purely about personal taste and how something speaks to an individual, and that's going to be different for different people. So I don't really think you can say that one poem is better than another. You can say that there are poems that you like more than you like others.
Yeah, definitely.
But so the whole sort of competitiveness of it, I didn't like. What I did like, though, is that some of those ones that I did in Manchester, they used to do some at the Contact Theatre. I don't know if you ever went to those, but they did some there, and they were a bit like comedy clubs, really.
Oh, right. Sure.
Only they were poetry slams, but they were like comedy clubs in so much as you had quite sort of lively, quite boisterous audiences that didn't mind having a bit of a heckle and didn't mind joining in and stuff, and that was good, and it was a really good atmosphere. And I think sort of from that, the kind of the sort of poetry spoken word scene has kind of evolved from that. And I think it's I think it's quite different now. There are a lot more opportunities. We were talking about this earlier on, but there are a lot more opportunities for just turning up and doing some poems in sort of open mic spots and things like that than there ever were before. And obviously here in Macclesfield, there's the open mic poems and pints night that they do at the Button Warehouse. So there's more opportunities for going along and doing poetry in a bit more of a kind of friendly and less sort of hostile environment, I think, which is a good thing.
And as well as doing poetry slams and things, what have been some of your highlights of performing? I mean, you did one recently, but like prior to that.
So last week I did an evening at the Townley Hall with my friends Phil Poyser and Nick Degg from Stoke, Phil is a very prolific, very good poet who lives here in Macclesfield, and Nick is a friend of mine and a fellow poet who's from Stoke-on-Trent, and we did last week. We did this thing for the Friends of Silk, for the museum, for the Silk Museum, Friends of, and this was the third one of those that we've done. We did two sort of before the COVID pandemic, and this was the first one that we'd done afterwards, and it was great. It was really good, and it was really good to, we got a good audience, and they were very sort of receptive and very responsive, and it went very well. So that was good. Other things that I've done recently, I talked about the Button Warehouse thing. I was very pleased to be asked to be the guest poet, the one before last. So I did a sort of extended set there. That was nice. I mean, other things that I've done in the past, I've at one time I was kind of, I wanted to sort of get out and about and do as much as I possibly could.
Right,
so I would
right.
just go anywhere and everywhere where they
really
would
good.
have me. And so I've done sort of gigs in Liverpool, in Manchester, all over the place, down south in Crawley. I've been, and me and Phil went down to Oxford as well. Oxfordshire. So we've got about over the years, really. And I guess, I guess the thing is, all of those, I don't know if there's any one performance or one gig that sort of stands out as being better or more memorable than others. I think the thing is, though, that they're all kind of different, and what's different is the audience and how they kind of respond.
Yeah, great. And so when you're writing poems, I guess it's different for everyone how you come up with them and things. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you do that, or
yeah, well,
is it a bit of black magic?
well, it is a bit. It is a bit, because what happens with me is I get a line or a couple of lines or a little sort of refrain in my head.
Yeah.
And then I build it up from that. Occasionally I think, if something is, if I feel like I've got something to say about something, I will think, and that's obviously gone on quite a lot recently with everything that's happening politically in the world and in the country. And you kind of go, well, I've got things that I want to say about that, but what triggers it off is getting some kind of sort of, line or refrain in my head. I can never sit down to write a poem.
Right. Okay.
I've tried to do that a few times, and people have gone, "Can you write me a poem about something?" And I've gone, "Well, I'll try," and it hardly ever works, really.
Right.
So when all the lockdown thing was going on, I hardly wrote a word.
Right.
And I don't know why that was, but I kind of got to the point where I was thinking, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to write another poem because it's just not happening. It's not coming. And I don't know if that's because, I don't know, because things were...
I think it's affected everyone differently. Some people wrote loads, some people wrote nothing.
Yeah.
I think it was either or.
Yeah. Well, I wrote very, very little anyway, and as I say, I think what it is things get triggered off in my head from, I can be walking down the street or driving in my car, or I can, be at some sort of event and something will trigger. And I suppose during the lockdown, you didn't do any of those,
stimuli,
those things, so it wasn't happening. But I'm glad to say, I'm sort of probably not back to where I was before, because I was writing all the time. But I'm getting more back, and I think all the ones that I did earlier on, in that set I did earlier on, are kind of ones that I've written in the last sort of year or so.
Right.
So relatively new stuff.
Yeah. So you release one book.
So I have it's all the way over there.
Right.
But I have a book. Yeah. So basically, what happened was, Mike, I was doing all these gigs and going to various places and doing open mic spots and poetry slams and occasionally doing sort of sets of my own.
Yeah.
And people were coming up and going, "Where can we read your poems?" You see, and I went, "Well, I don't write poems for you to read. I write poems to perform."
Yeah.
But I did start putting stuff on Facebook, on my Facebook page, which is Mark the Poet, if you have a look at that. So and now I have this kind of routine where I'll write a poem and I'll scribble for a while, and get it to the point where I feel I can't do any more with it, and then I'll put it on the Facebook page, and that's sort of me finishing the poem, really. So they're on that. But then my dad, believe it or not, because he's not a big fan of my poems. I hope he's not going to watch this. I don't think he will, but anyway. But he's not. I think but it's true to say. But he doesn't like the bad language,
right?
But anyway, he said, why don't you do a book? I'll do it for you. I mean, he's got some experience of doing sort of self-publishing stuff. So he basically just made it for me. I sent him a few poems.
Sure.
Nice. And he did that book for me. So I've been when I've been going around doing gigs and things, I've been sort of plugging it and sending a few of them. I'm not very I forget.
Right. Yeah.
So I'll take a pile with me, and then I'll go, oh shit, I didn't mention the book. So anyway, now I have a book, everybody, out. It's called Mark the Poet, the Anthology.
Yeah.
And if you contact me via my Facebook page, you can have a copy for only £4, which is a bargain.
Yeah.
I think your next question is going to be, have I got any plans to do some more? And I have, because obviously I can't remember, probably about 4 years that one came out. So they're sort of quite old poems. So I think I need to do a newer, more up to date version.
And how do you decide which ones go in there? Are they just the favourite ones that you regularly perform, or is it?
Well, the for that book, they were the favourite ones that I would perform at that time. However, I was sort of very aware of the fact that a lot of what I write is quite, sort of topical, and I try to write topical stuff, and I write sort of political stuff that's about what's going on at that time. And there's a few, unfortunately, like the one that I wrote about refugees, which kind of doesn't become untopical, but a lot of them, I've got poems about Theresa May and David Cameron and all these people from the past
I suppose with a lot of these poems, at one point they're topical and they come out with being topical, and then they kind of, even longer time, they come a bit timeless, don't they? Come up that point in history, I suppose.
Yes, I suppose that's true. I'm not sure many of mine have come to that point yet, but yes, I take your point that they become sort of historically interesting, maybe. But so anyway, the ones I decided to put in that book were ones that were fairly kind of non-specific, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. That said, there's one in there about Margaret Thatcher, but I think that's a case in point though, where because the one that I did right at the beginning tonight mentions Margaret Thatcher, and whatever you think of Margaret Thatcher, she's somebody that has had a huge influence on the way that society has sort of been shaped since her time, hasn't she? And so obviously no one will be surprised to hear I think that's in a very negative way, but there will be people that think, you know, her legacy is a good and a positive one. I don't agree with them, but that's what some people will think.
And I suppose another question poets who do a certain style always get asked: have you ever done anything musical with your poems? Is that something you'd have with a backing track or something?
Well, you see, you were asking me about how I come to write poems, and sometimes, as I say, I get lines in my head or refrains, and sometimes they have like a little tune with them.
Right. Yeah.
But because I have absolutely no musical skill
Yeah.
or ability, they never go. They never. The tunes never sort of, you know, never meet the light of day. I think though potentially, you know, some of them. You see, if I had any musical skills or ability, I would be a songwriter.
Right.
I just haven't, and so. But I do feel like, you know, I do love music, and music has always been a huge influence on me. So I would love to do that. I would love to sort of set some of the poems to music. It would be something I'd love to do at some point in the future. So if there's anyone out there who can help me make that happen.
You're performing last week. I'm not sure if you've got anything coming up.
Nothing specific. Yeah. No, I mean, I as I say, I will, you know, I will go along to open mic things and stuff like that. I'm planning to do some stuff with Nick Degg, who was talking about before, in the next few months, I think. Nick is planning, we were talking about this before, Nick is planning this UK tour, or a tour, an alphabetical tour where he's going to go to places through the alphabet from A to Z. So at some point during that, he will do M and he will come to Macclesfield, and we're hoping that will be at MASH. And so,
well, he's going to be on in a couple of weeks.
So he'll be able. Hopefully, he'll have a few more details for you by then.
And so, find you online. We'll just remind people: is it just the Facebook that you mainly do, or
it's just Facebook, Mike, because you know, I'm kind of a bit of a Luddite, really. Well, I'm not a Luddite, but I've kind of come to technology very late on in life, or rather, it's come to me very late on in life, and so I kind of do Facebook, and that's about it. I have a Twitter account, and I have no idea what to do with it. But so I have the Facebook page, and you know, but I'm not saying I'll never do any of the other social media stuff. I just don't know what it is at the moment or how to use it.
Well, thanks for coming on the show and performing, and it's been really good having you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.